to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through a story about UBI, or at least something coming close to it, coming from states that are actually sponsoring it with their marijuana tax money. And yes, I said it funny, but marijuana. With that, we will also end the day with our daily delight, make sure everybody leaves with a smile on their face, but we do have something to get to. Before recording this, found out that previous president, Joe Biden, is actually diagnosed with pancreas cancer, which has a very low survival rate. It seems to be very aggressive. So, though I don't agree, I haven't always agreed, doesn't matter. With all of his policies, it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, he is a person who decided to sacrifice and lead this nation, and he's a person that we should all be praying for and wishing the best for. So prayers go out to Mr. Joe Biden. In a not funny way, I hope the moonshot funding that he put together for cancer, though it didn't seem to reap many benefits during his time, I hope there was something that comes out of it so he can say that he genuinely benefited other people's lives, but also that he can get something to benefit him directly. But that is enough on that. No comments today. If you want to throw something down there, throw something down there, but there's no daily debate. So with that said, let's jump to our article that comes from our friends over at Business Insider. Headline reads, a marijuana tax is now funding 750 no-strings-attached monthly payments to families in New Mexico. So we've actually covered a similar proposal that was brought together in Denver previously. It's interesting that it happened in a pro-recreational marijuana state as well, though a lot of the funding wasn't actually coming from marijuana taxes. It was set aside in order to test the idea of a UBI program being able to work on a local level. And this is another attempt by people who, and let's be clear, this main one that they're talking about is in New Mexico, Albuquerque, very blue-leaning place. This is a attempt to supplement a little bit of income for people that are on the lower side of the economic spectrum. And while I always am empathetic to the idea that we have to support the people at the bottom part of the bracket the most, I'm always hesitant to simply give them money. But that doesn't mean we can't hear them out. It doesn't mean we can't listen to what they have to say. So, quote, some families in Albuquerque, New Mexico started receiving monthly no-strings-attached payments this month as part of a new basic income project funded in part by tax revenue from recreational cannabis sales. The city first approved the $4.02 million basic income plan in March. City revenue from marijuana sales is contributing more than $2 million to that total, according to a city press release, end quote. So, if you're going to legalize marijuana, and you're going to legalize all these different types of drugs, which I'm not saying we're going to, but let's go pure libertarian, perfect theory world. Let's say you do legalize all these different drugs, creating a system that is able to give back to community members based on the sales of recreational drugs. It seems like a incentive system that is pure of heart, because we want to make sure that people are not haphazardly being thrown in jail or arrested for using different drugs that they may be addicted to, and we want to provide them paths forward. If you were to actually put some of that money towards the programs that they would need to get off of those drugs, I think you can make a really strong argument on that front personally, though I think we should decriminalize all different drugs. I've talked about this one before. The social impact, and obviously I'm amenable. I've heard many different arguments to this as a person who has a personality type that is meant very often hyperfixates on things. I can understand how these characteristics in people, especially young children who haven't learned how to manage them yet, could be very dangerous when adding any sort of drug to the overall situation. Though I think we should decriminalize, and if we're going to decriminalize, we should also create programs that are meant to help people get off of these drugs. The reason that I think decriminalizing is more important is actually trying to limit the stigma of people who are currently on them and aid them to get off. I do not actually think that doing drugs, doing all these different types of drugs, is actually good for you. As a person who also has a personality type that leans a little bit more towards the delay and has to really implement lots of systems to be disciplined, and even then they don't always work out, anything that could possibly slow that, cause any sort of delay, create blockages, aka drug consumption, I think that is a bad thing. And I think a lot of people fall in the category of unable to sustain drug use and function properly. Therefore, I think a lot of people should be off of them, but it doesn't mean that the drugs themselves should be criminalized. So if you were to make an argument like that, I would be very amenable to that. But an argument where we simply hand out money based on these revenues, and of course there's other supplemental revenues, because they said that the marijuana tax income is roughly about $2 million that they're putting towards this. It begs the question, what are they going to do with this money? What are people in the lowest economic stratum going to do with extra money? This has been a argument for a long time. Republicans will go out and say, well, they're just going to go spend it on bad things, their bad habits. And Democrats are going to say they're going to use it to spend on their children and buy essentials, so on and so forth. The Denver example that we provide, that I mentioned earlier, that we had reported on basically 2 years ago, showed significant data. We're talking about a little bit over 60% of the population using it directly to pay bills or to pay things off that they had, debt-wise, or to buy essentials. So the data, though it has not been borne out on a national scale, obviously, on smaller scales, it seems to show that people are going to use it for the most part on small items that they need, or as supplemental income in order to get them across that threshold of being able to survive. Though, of course, there are always the counterexamples of people who use it for bad means, and to pretend as though the statistics taken by these different organizations doing the breakdown and doing the interviews afterwards, to pretend as though the people responding would say openly admit that they're using it on drugs, even in a place where it is recreational, that would provide a perverse incentive, because that would actually not provide a perverse incentive, that would create a situation where the government has to directly deal with the fact that their supplemental income is being used for not only what they don't want, which they want it to be used for families, they want it to be used for people to be able to lift themselves out of poverty, not on drugs that won't necessarily get them out of that situation, and people aren't going to openly report on that. Now, of course, you cannot invalidate all the information based on that alone, but that is something that you have to genuinely consider when you look at these self-reported spending habits. Now, if you were able to make one string attached to these sort of beta programs and say, okay, you have to return your receipts for everything you purchase with the money, and you make it a credit card or a prepaid debit card of some kind so that you can actually track this sort of thing. And I say you don't necessarily have to tell the populace, and that's not to say that, oh, well, we're going to track what they're spending and we don't have to tell them. But if you want a truly blind understanding of where people are spending this money, that you probably would have to do it in in some way like that. So let's actually dive into another argument that they propose here, and I will make it brief, but this is another argument that they're proposing for why these sort of things can very well work. And I am always open to these sort of arguments, but I do believe there has to be more thorough integration of these sort of systems and more thorough data tracking on where this money is going, in order to be sure that we know that this has been a overall positive benefit to the society. Because you could make an argument that the parents do use it and to pay for their kids' backpacks, school materials, food, but maybe the other part of the population that's getting it, it's not necessarily good for them. And even then, should the government be doing it? Not necessarily. But for me to just simply strike it down by saying the government shouldn't be doing it, that's not fair. And it doesn't actually play out some of the arguments here that you actually have to engage with. You have to explore in order to not only smack down, and that's not to say that all of them deserve to be smacked down, but to end up at a place where you can explain the thinking, you can explain what's going on, you can understand the arguments that they're trying to throw your way, and be able to create formulated and I was going to say well-versed, but more simply, well-articulated points of view. So let's jump into one of their next arguments. Quote, advocates for a basic income say it helps people in difficult financial situations find their footing. Basic income studies often show positive results. Recipients say it improves their housing security and mental health, and even allows them to seek better jobs through education and more time to search, end quote. And that is, of course, true. If you're working as a barista, you get an extra $750 a month. Maybe in some areas that is actually your rent payment. If you're in a 4-bedroom house somewhere in one of the cheaper cities, that can basically pay your rent while you continue to look for new jobs. So all those things seem to be true. The question is, does that burden need to fall on the government, or can that go to nonprofits? So let me ask this question. Why could the government not, and I think we're going to, this is a big loop here that I'm about to propose, and it could be cut out by the government not taking out the taxes at all, but why couldn't the government actually take the tax revenue and then donate it to nonprofits that focus on these sort of things and hand out the money through grants? And the reason I say we could at least start down that road is because then eventually we could see the government create systems that would say, this is a voluntary system. Companies do not have to do this for the community, or people do not have to donate to this, but it is recommended, and we have been doing it, and we see the positive impacts of these nonprofits actually working on the ground. I understand nonprofits can become inflated, that they can become just as corrupt and bureaucratic as governments, but at least those nonprofits do not have the power of force when it comes to requiring people to pay into them like the government does when it comes to taxes. I think that could be if we're genuinely going to look at the data, and the data in this case, what they're proposing, which once again, I think it's a little bit skewed, and we've seen some mixed results on the amount of people that productively use UBI, then we can at least say that it is voluntary, and we have examples of which we can present to people to voluntarily put in their money. And if there is corruption, bureaucratic bloat, they don't see positive results, they don't see homelessness ending, or at least being limited in their community, they can readdress where that money is going to go rather than the government forcefully coming and taking it from you. Now, of course, these all come with caveats. What I would also recommend is when you come into this episode, if you've made it this far, go back to the Denver episode. It was UBI in Denver, I believe the title was. It was somewhere in the 200s, and I will actually find it, and then I will provide it to you in the description. Go listen to that one. It's an interesting exploration of it. It's a lot more in-depth on some of the data that comes from that article where they're talking about the benefits of UBI, though it is still not the article itself, which you can find in the link in the description of that video. So with that, let's end with our daily delight. This one comes from Dog Time. Headline reads, video. Golden retrievers have the best time at dog-friendly zoo. And honestly, yes, it is great to see these guys kind of zooming through, seeing everything. But there's a little surprise at the end. It was the one big animal that they were going to show down against, and it was honestly hilarious to see the ending of it. So if you want to have a smile on your face, it's not that long. It's about a minute and a half. So go down into the description. You can find all of the links for both the Daily Delight and also this article down there in the description below the like and subscribe button. Also down there you can find podcasts on Spotify, Podcast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip, where I post links directly to the videos on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, as well as 6 and 6, which is 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less. It's international news, and that comes out at the same YouTube channel. The link will be on the Twitter handle, and that is called excuse me, and that will be on Tuesday and Thursday. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.